Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to offer an overview of Mars stationing direct in Cancer through the 12 houses. So I spoke to this briefly in my last video. We have to understand this Mars stationing in context of its moving towards its final opposition with Pluto. It's right now, actually, at the moment of this video, we're just 24 hours away from its actual stationing direct. So it's at a total complete standstill. So all of us are in that Mars concentrated energy right now. When a planet stations, that time of it actually, from our geocentric experience, completely stopping, there's a great amount of attention placed on that planetary function. Oftentimes, there can be this sort of pregnant pause. Something needs to happen. Something needs to change. In this case, Mars, choices, responses, direction, leadership, but maybe not knowing how or what or where or how to bring it forward. As this Mars picks up speed and then moves from the cardinal sign of Cancer, which is very much about self-discovery on one level, right? It's establishing a sense of self and safety and identity in the world, into this more fixed, determined, confident sign of Leo, opposite the fixed planet Pluto in Aquarius. It's a very powerful vibrational shift. So I really want to frame the context of this analysis of Mars through the 12 houses in Cancer in that context. There's something that we're really beginning to claim and internalize about ourselves and our direction, and there is a potential movement towards greater confidence, greater certainty. Now, of course, all the other things are true as well. There can be an immense amount of fear and insecurity and polarization with this Mars in Cancer moving to its opposition with Pluto moving into Leo. This is sort of like, I feel threatened. My sense of identity, who I am, what defines my sense of security, is being threatened by what's happening outside. We move into Leo and there's a sense of pride. And I've given this example before. You can think of Cancer as speaking to one's identification with their family, with their tribe, with their belonging. And relative to its polarity to Capricorn, you can also be identified with, I am at home in my religion, or in my race, or in my culture, or in my nation, or in my country, or in this political movement, or this political affiliation. Right? What we know, including the structural realities that we're born into, that we're conditioned by, can easily become the basis for our sense of self, where we feel safe, where we feel secure. And so we have to really watch out for where we determine the outside as providing an external threat to our sense of stability and security. The movement into Leo, and we of course see this right now with Pluto and Aquarius, this is a huge piece in the collective, can really polarize a sense of me versus them. I'm fighting for a righteous cause because you or this group or these people, which are abstractly this other, even someone we know well becomes this abstract other, are representing something that's impeding my right and freedom to creatively actualize Mars and Leo. There can be a self-righteousness and pride that's growing. So that's a negative side to this. Whereas the more healthy expression of Mars stationing direct in Cancer is the cultivation of emotional self-leadership. What am I feeling? How do I want to respond? What is my inner experience telling me about where I am relative to where I want to go? And this is a growing of courage and strength and self-confidence to make our life happen. See, an important thing to understand about Cancer is it corresponds to our self-image, right? Our ego structure, our sense of identity. So we all have one. And that's what enables us to kind of look out through the lens of our eyes and say, oh, here's the world. This is okay. This is safe. I can take this much and I can take that much, and we interface with that. If you have a healthy sense of self, right? If when we were children, we were given the imprinting of you're loved, you're wanted, you belong, then as adults, we move through life and we can look out there and say, I'm secure, I'm safe. Oh, that's scary, that's insecure. How do I tend to myself? How do I nurture all of the transitions and the unknowns in life, right? But if we're fundamentally feeling insecure, we'll generally, to broadly speak to in two categories, fall into one experiences. We'll hide and protect. We won't make changes. We'll hold on to the bonds, the connections, the ways of being that just feel safe and secure. I'm not going to be rejected. I'm not going to be unloved. That deeper sense of vulnerability isn't going to be hurt. Or we'll be very defensive and on guard. Everything can easily be a signal of being attacked, like a dog gnarling at you because they don't know that you're safe. You're just trying to pet them. There can be this projection of insecurity that results in living in a world where we're just on guard all the time. So in this cultivation of self-leadership, it's also a cultivation of self-security. I know who I am, and maybe if I don't know who I am, I'm willing to step into, that's the point with Mars, I'm willing to step into a greater challenge to grow into who I am only through the stepping into it. Because we can't just stay safe forever without taking some risks. And that's what I'm going to focus on in this video. I've done a Mars in Cancer through the 12 houses back in September or so when Mars first entered Cancer. But I'm not going to address much of what I said there. I'm going to focus specifically on this emergent self-leadership confident piece. Because again, it's building energy in Cancer, which we can poetically say is a symbol for get to know who you are and what you're capable of. Get to know the truth of your own security. Develop the courage to make new changes, to make new choices, to be more bold and courageous than you thought yourself to be, and become more mindful of your reactions or your lack of reaction. And where's the evolutionary path? Where are you really being called? And then again, moving into that Leo opposition with Pluto, it's very activating, very catalyzing. So before I jump into this, let me go over the first year training program. This is the 6th or 5th year that I'm teaching this program. This is an opportunity to dive deeply into the lineage of evolutionary astrology as taught by Jeffrey Wolf Green, taught through my ongoing lens of realization. This is about learning how to read the natal chart from the soul's point of view. And what that means is we look at each lifetime as created as a template for the soul's ongoing evolutionary growth. So every challenge, every dynamic, every experience that we have is ultimately internalized from the perspective of how is this serving our ongoing realization, our ongoing awakening. This is designed for those who are either totally new to astrology or those who are already well practiced in astrology but want to start from the beginning from an evolutionary soul focus. Part 1, which is the first 5 or so months of the year program, is focused entirely on the basics, the philosophy, planet, signs, houses. Part 2 is focused on chart interpretation work, where we actually begin to read the chart in order to understand the core soul dynamics that we bring into this lifetime and what the evolutionary intention of this lifetime is, where we're growing, what the intended work is. We begin in just over a month from now. Check it out in the description below. And as always, I'm available for one-on-one readings for individuals, for couples, and long-term soul-to-soul companionship sessions. Lastly, I will often write articles in tandem to these videos. So if you want to receive my articles and my recent videos and work updates in your inbox, you can subscribe in the description below. Okay, everyone, let's jump into Mars direct in Cancer through the 12 houses. Mars direct in Cancer in the first house. Well, this really highlights on the one hand, the sort of angry, ferocious dog archetype. If we're believing that there are people or conditions in our life that are keeping us back, that are holding us from feeling secure, feeling happy, getting what we need, then there can be a lot of sort of on-edge threat. The key phrase for the signature is emotional immaturity. Now you put Mars in the first house in Cancer, a child can be expected to have a very strong emotional response. And what's very interesting is, when a child has a strong emotional response, you don't want to suppress it, but you don't want to indulge the story, right? There's a quality of giving it space and giving that child permission to feel valid in their experience, but they're not necessarily going to be validated in their story, right? I experience this all the time. One sibling says something to the other sibling, and the other sibling just takes that in a way that is internalized as however it's meeting their program, right? And the first sibling did nothing wrong, right? They weren't trying to hurt them, weren't trying to insult them. but it comes up in such a deep way. And so it's very easy for the second sibling to say, oh, they're hurting me, or they're keeping me from this, or they told me that I can't be this or I can't do that. And you can really see that what they're experiencing is actually interfacing with a very vulnerable self-image. They said that I can't do this. I'm not allowed to do this, right? We exaggerate and we make very real the projections of our own fears and our own insecurities. So we need to allow the space to experience it, I think that's often what's difficult as adults dealing with strong Cancer first house energy. How do you work with these strong energetic feelings, these impulses, without causing hurt or violence? But we don't want to suppress it and push it away. So working with that emotional energy, but not necessarily being so short and quick to do something with it. The second is, if we're feeling stifled, if we're afraid of embracing our own leadership, Mars stationing direct says you have to be willing to individuate and move out from the womb of security and the known. Explore the edge of where you might feel safe in this new moment, in this new experience. Perhaps there are ambitions and entrepreneurial goals and desires that you have, but to claim them and embrace them, you need to be able to act on them. So this might be a calling and an instigation of more leadership and more courage. And again, oftentimes we don't know how strong and how secure we are until we put ourselves in experiences that are simply going to shake us and teach us of our security, teach us of our strength. Mars stationing direct in Cancer in the second house. Here we're dealing with a very primal sense of physical security. Do I have what I need? Do I have what I need to protect my tribe, to feed the other lions? And there's a sense of my own survival on a very emotional level is up for threat. And if I don't act, if I don't do something, if I don't claim my own values and affirm what I need to do to receive what I need in life, existentially it can feel like I'm going to die. I'm not going to live. I'm going to be left alone like a starving little animal, a bit betrayed by their clan. So on the one level, if there's a lack of energy, if we're feeling stifled or stuck, this might be a calling to say, my life has value. I can't stay in the safety of the known and comfortable, where everything's okay or where I know I'm not going to be threatened. I need to take risks. I need to put myself out there. I need to claim my art, my passions, the desires that I have to enjoy my life. If this is on the level of just simple pleasure and joy, we need to be willing to experience more in life. We need to get ourselves out of the framework of the known and invest our energy and our time in the things that really bring us that pleasure and joy. If it's on the level of money, we have to put effort. But, I don't want to be seen. I'm shy. I'm afraid. I'm vulnerable, right? That's the issue with Cancer in the second house. Of all combinations, this signature could really be prone to staying in isolation, right? Second house is hermiting. Cancer is, I want to stay safe. I want to be protected. But then your resources dry up. There's a lack of joy, a lack of delight, and then a lack of the basic resources that we need in order to survive. So this can be pushing ourselves out of the hole in the earth, right? Like that little place where we isolate ourselves to stay protected and hidden. Pushing ourselves out of there and seeing that we have more resources, more capacities, and thus there's more potential in life than we may have otherwise realized. And this again might mean being insecure. I've never done this before. I've never tried to sell this, or I've never, even just taking this class or investing in a new experience. It can be vulnerable to do something new, but we won't grow if we don't expose ourselves to new experiences or new challenges to bring more value into our life. Mars moving direct in Cancer in the third house. So think of Cancer in the third house as the continuity, safety, ground, and familiarity of our thoughts, of how we're mapping out reality. We feel a sense of familiarity in the known, and the logical frameworks that we establish aren't going to threaten our sense of self and security. The challenge here is to actually embrace new thoughts, new learning, new ideas, that will further expand our understanding of who we are and the life that we're living in. There can be a deep sense of feeling threatened relative to not having all of the information. So imagine this scenario. You're sitting with a bunch of people at a beauty parlor or a hairstylist or a barber store. And one person speaks about the current news, and another person responds to that and says, oh yeah, that reminds me of my son who used to do this, this, and that. And the conversation kind of goes on where every thought just sort of elicits the emotional memory of another thought. In such a conversation, there isn't really a lot of ground. There's no substance. There's nothing meaningful happening other than just thoughts and ideas that have more of an emotional resonance. They're being shared. Mars moving forward wants to sort of push beyond all of that and ask questions, get curious. It wants to learn something new. And this might mean choosing to concentrate our mental energy beyond the thoughts and the ideas that are safe and familiar to us. What do I really want to learn? What do I want to know? What is it I want to really understand? Ooh, wait, I don't want to hear that. That's scary for me. See, what happens is we might gather information, but then relative to the emotional memory that it brings up, it'll either distract us, we'll either be distracted towards something else entirely, or we'll just kind of push it away and go to some other topic. There can be a fleetiness with Cancer in the third house relative to not really wanting to address actual substance and content. But the beauty is a sort of emotionally authentic intelligence, this ability to feel and to identify with clarity and sharpness. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I want to know more about. This will be important for me to understand. Here's where I need more conversation, more information, more data, more research in order to feel more comprehensive. Otherwise, we form very quick opinions about things without having a lot of thought in it, right? We feel something or we see a headline and that makes us feel a certain way and we form a conclusion. Then we talk about it. So Mars is inviting more intellectual leadership and emotional intellectual congruency and clarity and purpose. So what do I want to learn? And to meet the edges of, oh, this is scary. This is where I don't have answers. What do I need to do? What do I have to ask? What research do I need to do to open up these doors for greater learning and understanding? And for many souls, this might mean, okay, I'm going to speak and bring forward the content that's scary to speak about. I'm going to ask the questions to get the information I've always been afraid to learn about. Fundamentally, it says I'm secure and I'm safe to learn something new. Remember that Cancer also speaks to where we'll become identified with our nation or culture or race or whatever, the Cancer-Capricorn polarity. And so then we begin to classify information relative to what resonates with our sense of identity. This could also be about expanding beyond the very limited, narrow framework of the world that we know, that is familiar to us, and being open to see much more of the larger picture. In that sense, there might be a strengthening of our voice. Do you have a message to share? Is there something that wants to come forward? Naturally, this will be a healing message, right? It's going to further affirm the safety and the clarity of your own identity, that you are safe here. To be empowered with Mars and Cancer in the third house is fundamentally to say, my voice is strong. I can learn what I need to learn and I can say what I need to say. And there's purpose, meaning, and direction in the power of my voice. And one more thought about the signature. There might be a need to say something, right? So Mars moving direct in Cancer in the third house is make your argument. Offer the perspective that maybe isn't going to be all nice and gentle and pleasant, because we don't want to offend anyone. We don't want to be pushy. But there can be a fierceness here of saying what needs to be said, telling your story. In fact, sometimes your story, even if it's uncomfortable for some people, is the biggest thing that you can share. Your story, your own personal experience, how you've shaped your understanding of the world. That can be very healing and illuminating for other people that simply don't have that same reference point as yourself. So having the courage to speak, to share your experience, to share your thoughts, share your story might also be a part of the signature. Mars direct in Cancer in the fourth house. So this directly speaks to the archetype of our emotional imprinting and nurturing bonds that we create. As adults, we're all learning how to establish a sense of security as we're navigating this world of ongoing change, right? We need to be able to say, I feel what I feel, but I don't have to believe it. I don't have to project some kind of absolute reality here relative to what I feel. This is all just something arising in me. This really does emphasize being a leader of emotional self-care. Being able to establish a sort of independence and autonomy in saying, I'm secure in myself and I can move through this world with that security in place. Otherwise, there's a deep sense of feeling threatened. Am I loved? Am I wanted? Am I okay? So we can offer very strong reactions when we don't feel safe, projecting the external world to be offering some kind of essential threat. Or we can say very small, again, that Cancer protective shell. The energy that's growing with this Mars moving direct, moving towards this Leo and Aquarius opposition, is really calling us to get ready to birth ourselves. What do you need to do to establish the proper emotional care and support? How do you protect and nurture the part of yourself that's still growing into a sense of confidence? So this is not about pushing ourselves beyond the threshold of what's comfortable, but it is about knowing how to, in a sense, hold the hand of our little one to parent ourselves so that we can nurture and grow in a healthy direction. This does take some courage and willingness to say, I might be afraid, but this is the only way for me to learn about the truth of my own essential security. We might have responsibilities and work and things to do in this world, but this stationing direct might feel overwhelming. How can I show up when I feel so unsafe or so insecure or so afraid? Where the nature of our relationships and our bonds might feel shaky or we don't know how others feel about us. All of the reasons to live in a state of insecurity. This Mars direct says, well, you might feel sadness. You might be afraid of not being protected or not being close to the sources of security. Like I mentioned, children have this dual urge to both separate but also make sure they're secure. And as we all mature, we have that need that's persistent with us, right? We want to know that we're safe, but we want to know that we're not stifled and held back from walking our path. So there can be a lot of deep emotional vulnerability that we also access here. There can be a lot of unexpressed emotional energy. Like if you're in this sadness and this anger that's not being expressed, it's going to be very hard to feel motivated to do anything with our life, right? So this is that leadership. And what do I need to do? How do I need to move my energy and bring this forward so that I can actually move on with my life in a good way? And I'll say to that, if there are strong emotions coming up right now and you have this placement, maybe fear or feeling stifled or anger or just strong energy, but you don't know how to express it or what to do with it, I just want to say there's something worth honoring about just that. This Mars is picking up speed. There's a lot of emotional information that wants to reveal itself by just learning how to be with and to listen to what is this asking me to do. This Capricorn polarity always speaks to the importance of boundaries. What might I need to affirm or communicate, or what needs do I need to get met in my life so I can feel that I'm actually receiving the essential care and support that I need? When we feel safe, when we feel loved, when we feel well nourished, then we're able to give more of ourselves. We're able to express. We can give all of our gifts and show up in the world because we feel secure within ourselves. But when all this emotional energy is held back, it's really hard to metaphorically get out of bed. It's really worth considering that. Mars direct in Cancer in the fifth house. This does very strongly emphasize that quality of self-birthing. There can be a sense of being stifled because of a deep vulnerability and sensitivity to, am I going to be received? Am I going to be liked? Am I going to be hated? Am I going to be adored? The need to know our own safety and sense of being protected in life with the fifth house expression of needing to actualize our own creative essence in this world can lead towards a hyper-subjective self-focus. And so then everything can be taken very personally. This Mars says, have the courage to break out of that. Look at your own purpose, your own beauty, your own potential, and be the leader to determine and make the choice to actualize your capacities in this life. Acknowledge and give yourself that entitlement to make something of your life. Otherwise, there's that possibility of staying very small and protected. And it's a very interesting fifth house dynamic in general. which is really emphasized with Cancer. Either being very shy because we're so sensitive to being seen, which is sort of the opposite side of the coin of putting on a show and being performative, because that's too just a way to make sure people like us. How to stay true to ourselves while doing something new. And is there a project, an art, a creative exploration, something that wants to express that you've been afraid to really step into? A new avenue of self-exploration that's going to push you to new creative thresholds and goals and achievements that you've never really pushed yourself to actualize. We all have creative energy, and yet at the same time, we need to nurture and develop it by using it and engaging it and giving ourselves that permission to be creative beings. And that sometimes means doing scary and new things. So that's something worth exploring with this signature. Mars direct in Cancer in the 6th house. In short, this is tend to the mess. Whatever projects, whatever procrastination, whatever energetics are in our life that are not being tended to, it leads to a neglect. And you can think of Cancer in the 6th house, metaphorically, as like, you are not getting enough sleep, you have a little cold, you're not eating well, and just not neglecting, avoiding the proper self-care and nurturance. Then what's neglected gradually leads to a crisis. So Mars is having the motivation and the confidence to do something about it. Where confidence is relevant here is because it's easy to feel overwhelmed and sort of disempowered by how much needs to be fixed or how many things there are to do, where we feel very small and incapable or just like too far lost to begin to heal and make congruency in our life. But this really just says start. Empower yourself to engage your life and begin to make healing. Mars invites clarity of direction, leadership, and choice making. And if we don't make choices, things don't improve or get better on their own. So we need to have that self-confidence to say, I can make my life healthier. Every condition in my life is an invitation to establish more ground, more congruency, more wellness in my life, not feeling small or victimized by what is out of our control. If you think about this in context of Mars moving into Leo, and let's say you have Leo in the 6th, some of us will have Leo in the 7th, but just think of it in context. That Leo 6th energy is, I'm doing something creative and meaningful with my life. Even if it's Leo in the 7th, same thing. Let's say you're going to have someone over for dinner. You have a 7th house date, right? You can't have anyone over for dinner if it's a mess in your home. And what we're doing in this 6th house, essentially we're preparing ourselves for a more meaningful social experience. We're able to actually give and share in relationship because we're not constantly struggling with tidying up and dealing with crisis and health issues and functioning on a basic level. So this is an opportunity to bring health and leadership and clarity and greater wellness into our life through our own courage and leadership to make better choices. And again, Mars says you might want to do something new or boldly explore something if it's a diet or a lifestyle change that you've never done before. If you don't make these changes or make these choices, you may not experience the health and the growth and the clarity that would otherwise come. If you're a healer or a practitioner or you're in some kind of service care role, this Mars further invites you to explore, are you taking care of yourself? Are you overstressing yourself? What changes, what shifts, what directions need to be embraced so that you can care for all of the details and maybe to correct where there might be either neglect or sort of a masochism and that sort of depletion of the archetypal practitioner or care provider that isn't actually caring for themselves. Mars direct in Cancer in the 7th house. So of course, Cancer in the 7th is the prime signature for affinity and bonds and trust and a good sense of connection in our relationships. We want to know that we're secure with each other, that we can depend upon each other. In a healthy, functioning expression, there's a state of giving and sharing where each person is receiving and giving in a way that really provides and cares for each essential's needs. However, this can easily become a prime example of codependency and stagnation. Are you okay with me? Are you okay with me? Do you feel good? And we can kind of play these roles where it's actually not true intimacy. It's more a matter of, I just got to make sure I feel good and that you feel good and that we feel good all the time. because we're afraid of loss, we're afraid of rejection, we're afraid of the insecurity that might arise in there being any kind of dissonance or break in the affinity. And yet we have Mars here stationing direct. If there's a building of anger or pressure or feeling stifled, the question is, what are your needs? Do you have needs that you're not expressing? What would it be to express that? And this isn't about being solution or outcome focused as much as how do you feel? Like, what do you feel? What is it like for you? And what does the other person? This is not just in personal relationships. We can just say in general, the agreements and the roles that we take on in all of our 10,000 different kinds of relationships. It's very easy to settle into, well, this is who I become and this is who people expect me to be. And I definitely don't want to hurt anyone or ruffle any feathers or create any kind of dissonance. So Mars is asking for relationship leadership, to be willing to be authentic about your needs, your desires, your feelings. Again, not with the outcome of thus you need to do this or I need to do this or I can't do this, but actual intimacy where we're not holding parts of ourselves back because we're afraid. In some relationships, actual conversation would be appropriate. In other relationships, it's simply a matter of saying, no, I'm not available for this. Or I said I'm going to do this, but actually I realize that's not right for me. The ability to just honor and make adjustments, seventh house adjustments, as we need to, so that our relationships nurture a true sense of care and wellness, don't just kind of hold us in this stagnant, got to make sure we're all okay with each other, but not actually growing. And as always, Mars is going to be inviting a new threshold of discovery. What are ways through which we can bring ourselves forward in our relationships, to ask questions we never asked before, to get curious in ways we've never curious? When we're afraid of change, we're not going to really be capable of hearing another person for who they are. So we can't actually hear them. And so thus information that's coming through in a relationship, if it's threatening what we're trying to hold on to, we won't actually be able to integrate it. But if we're courageous and we're okay with it, there's a greater capacity for listening. Because Mars says, I don't want to hold on to any kind of repressed emotion, any repressed content. Let's bring it forward and stay in a place of emotional maturity. Again, that Capricorn first house polarity is we need to be able to hold a ground of maturity within ourselves, regardless of how other people feel or how other people might react to us. So this is the ability and the courage to both listen in ways that maybe we've been afraid to listen, and also to bring more of our full self forward, expressing our yeses, our nos, our maybes, our feelings, and to allow that to move our relationship and to evolve our relationships in better ways. Mars direct in Cancer in the 8th house. So let's just again appreciate we're moving towards this Pluto-Leo opposition. Being in the 8th house really emphasizes this larger transmutational process. For every house that I've been speaking about, I want us all just kind of keep in the back of our minds that the courage that we're developing is moving us towards a greater evolutionary shift as represented by its movement into Leo opposite Pluto and wherever that is in our chart. Here in the 8th house, we're looking at where we can direct strong desire and fixation on the emotional, sexual, psychological bonds of security that provide for us a deep sense of, I feel safe and secure and loved here. But they can easily become addictions. We can get addicted to all kinds of relationships or getting involved in people where the power dynamics aren't healthy, but I'm loved and I'm wanted, right? There can be strong patterns of abuse and manipulation and addiction in these signatures. For some, it's having a lot of power and control in a relationship. For others, it's actually being very small and not having a lot of power or control. The key is to be able to empower our own soul, to have the energy to claim our own sovereignty and agency. And this might mean one of two things. One, if we're in a disempowering or perpetuating a disempowering situation in our life, that Mars is to individuate and say no. No to the entanglements, no to the unhealthy patterns. And this is not necessarily about rejecting a person. It's really looking at our own psychological patterns and being able to determine ourselves to not lose our own soul agency. So I'm at home within my own soul, Cancer in the eighth house. And to remember, we're birthing greater power, something that we maybe haven't yet tasted in this lifetime. So it's being able to weed out and stay psychically clear of that which might take our energy lower. It also might be having the courage to embrace what we're really wanting. We're going to be drawn towards experiences of all kind that, oh, this is scary. Be it a new business, a new course, a new project, a new relationship, a new investment of any kind. Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be betrayed? Am I going to get stuck in it? We can only get involved in more complexity in life to the extent that we are solid about our own ability to hold our own agency, right? The more stable we are on the inside, so that Capricorn second polarity, content, stable on the inside, the more that stability is known, the more we know that I'm not going to allow myself to get entangled in that which takes energy away, means we can actually get involved in greater complexity and grow more and expand more because we're established in our own security. So this is kind of like standing in the fire, letting it purify us, but being stronger and stronger through the fire. Mars leadership here is soul leadership. That you are eternal, you are powerful, and you can make whatever changes are necessary in your life that you are knowing that you need to make. And if there's anger, if there's fear, all of that again is an indication of something wants to change. Give it the space to incubate, to get to really know, what is your emotional body telling you? Where are you being called into greater courage and leadership right now to overcome perhaps something that you've not known you can overcome? And again, that movement into Leo and the opposition with Pluto, I think, for those who are doing that work to claim our own power and agency and choice, this opposition can bring a big release, a big shift, a big evolutionary move to a new threshold of freedom and confidence. I'll say one more thing about the signature that arises. There can be a deep empathic quality to Cancer in the eighth house, kind of like getting into the trenches, into the deeper, darker places, and nursing people in their darkest place. If we're empowered and clear and resilient in our own soul, we can go into those dark places without getting stuck there. But we have to also be aware of where we can go into those dark places and form entanglement and get attached and kind of stuck up in other people's energetics. So this Mars direct is also a teaching to make sure that we're stable and that we're a leader and that we're an agency over our own energy. Otherwise, we might fall into unconscious psychological patterns of forming bonds with unhealthy energetics and kind of losing our own freedom in that. As always, we can best help other people if we're in a state of security within ourselves and that we know our own shadow. We're aware of our weaknesses, and since we know our own limits, we know how to get into situations, but we know how to get out of situations because we trust in our capacity to make choices as needed. Mars direct in Cancer in the ninth house. We all have a journey to walk, and no one's journey is ever like anyone else's. You can't replicate someone else's path. You can't replicate the path you walked yesterday either. Our own path has to be authentic. It has to be grounded in a sincere, intuitive knowing of rightness. And this rightness is always, this is my walk. This is my truth. This is the path that I am walking. And we each form our own understanding, our own comprehensive cosmological perspective on life. And that cosmological perspective evolves, it grows as we continue to walk the pilgrimage of our own soul journey. We have to stay authentic. We have to stay true. And the issue here is if we get caught up in wanting to be understood, wanting to be believed, then we don't really allow ourselves to be grounded in that authenticity. So the challenge with Mars and Cancer in the ninth house could be, well, no one understands me, I'm different. So either we're arguing and trying to prove ourselves to belong, or we internally feel very alienated and we're afraid to live, speak, and express our truth. This moving direct can say two things. One, it's about cultivating the courage to walk your path. And that might mean metaphorically or literally get on the plane, go on that trip, enroll in that program, speak that truth, write that book, start that course, bring yourself out there because you have an insight that only you have and that only you hold. And the nature of Cancer is very intimate to our own personal experience. It's something that is indigenous to who we are as a soul, that again, no one else can replicate. This can also be expression of if we feel like we're lying, if we're alienated, if we're not honest about our own self, and we're walking a path, be it trying to fit into other beliefs of religious, spiritual, political, social philosophy, or idealism. This says stand in the courage of being true to yourself. And again, this is never about you have to prove something. You need other people to believe you. When we're actually in touch with our truth, this is a very interesting thing. Like when we're in touch with what's true for us, it's not alienating. There's nothing in it that is self-righteous or pushy or look at me, I'm right or you're wrong. We'll only feel argumentative because we feel threatened. Right? So Mars in Cancer moving direct, if we're inclined towards it, we might be very argumentative and feel like we have to fight really hard to win and be right. Or we might feel very weak. If I say this, everyone's going to misunderstand me and no one's going to believe me. Those are really two sides of the same coin. What is it like to be a leader of our own path and to find that truth where the teaching of it is in our walking of it. It's our living of it. And so the words we speak are helpful because it's true for us. The only way that I can express this is it's the difference between bringing forward a belief system, which again, it's like we don't really have any strength in beliefs. Belief systems are just things that we believe versus something that we know. When we know it, it's solid, it's grounded. Jeff Green often said, what you know, you don't need to believe because you know it. And I love that because it's so simple and it's so grounded. But the energy of what's known, it's contained and it's held within. It's a state of self-security. And that is a place from which others can learn from you. And it's also a place from which you can become truly receptive to all the gifts and the teachings that this journey of life wants to offer you. So follow your intuition for where you are a student and a teacher and where this life journey wants to offer more expansion. But if you don't follow that, if you don't follow your truth or speak your truth, notice the emotions and the energy or the repression or the stifling or the anger that's arising for you, because there might be useful information there for where you may not be living your truth and where there's a calling for more self-trust and more confidence. Mars direct in Cancer in the 10th house. So someone's got to be the adult. The tension of Mars and Cancer in the 10th house is it really brings together the parent-child archetype in a very unique way. We can say Mars is always implying a process of maturation and growth because we have these instinctual responses. And as we mature and grow in life, we learn how to use them and express them in more concrete or useful ways and in less destructive and reactive ways. Children and small babies, of course, don't know that. They shouldn't know that. But we learn that as we get older. Mars in Cancer in the 10th house highlights how are we going to work with our emotional needs, our emotional energy in grounded, disciplined, and constructive ways. So just think about the relationship between parents and children. And if you don't have children, this is still a very appropriate metaphor for you. Children undisciplined will have all kinds of strong emotional needs, demands, and energetics. The parent, if they're not disciplined themselves, they'll give into it, right? The child says, I want this, and you're getting like, I want this. Okay, fine. You want, and constantly adjusting and adapting to every sort of immediate emotional whim. That's incredibly exhausting. And thus, Cancer here in the 10th house can reflect an immense amount of exhaustion and depletion because there isn't adequate leadership in establishing healthy boundaries. So the other example is a ground of, no, this is what we're doing. I'm saying no to you here. I'm saying yes to you here. We're doing this. We're not doing this. You can't have that, but you can have this after you do that. Boundaries. So there's a sense of emotional regulation and there's a ground of safety that the impulsive emotionality of the moment isn't going to dictate how things go in your life. So in our own life, the question is, where do we need to strengthen our own emotional self-leadership? And maybe make better choices, right? Creating more discipline or regulation in terms of how we're taking care of ourselves, how we discipline our time, how we discipline our energy, because we're not going to be able to accomplish anything or make something meaningful of our life if we're just making impulsive emotional decisions. Or two, where we might need to work on our own boundaries. If we're constantly giving into whatever life is demanding of us, and we're not in touch with our own capacities, we're going to feel overworked and repressed. So the anger here can be as a result of emotional repression, not feeling our own emotions, not in touch with what we need. So this could be an example where the adult, if they've been too adulty, needs to relax and get in touch with what have I been repressing and what basic cares have I been ignoring for myself, because I'm so busy being responsible and supplying and accommodating for all the other beings that need me, whether it's family or job or your responsibilities in life in general. So the leadership to claim our own responsibilities and purpose and discipline in life with greater matured agency. I think one of the challenges here could be, well, what changes do I make? And as always, a big teaching with this Mars stationing is we may not know what changes we need to make, or how do I create a more healthy structural reality to care for all that needs to be cared for in a healthy and sustainable way without losing a lot of my time, losing a lot of my energy, without being sort of dragged under by the undisciplined emotional energies within and without. To actually gather that information and know what kind of changes are needed to be made, we have to first be willing to slow down and listen to how we feel, because that's the first indicator for where things need to change. And then we can just take their time. What's beautiful about the 10th house is there are people who have done the things that you're figuring out before you. Like, you're not the first one on this journey. There are other people who have experienced having kids, raising a family, or being an adult, or caring for other beings, or managing a lot of responsibility in the world. There are other people that have struggled with the same generic life lessons that we all struggle with. So we can learn from them. We can learn from our elders. What did you learn about this? Or what are some wisdom you can teach me about this? Because we're all learning how to do this in a good way without going so far in the extremes of rigidity or lacking in healthy boundaries. This Mars wants to say you can be healthy, you can meet the demands of your life and make better choices and structure your reality in much better ways. And do what you need to bring the proper care and nourishment. It's in your agency, it's in your control. Your choices are absolutely within your control, regardless of the social conditioning and the expectations and the roles that you are familiar with. Healthy changes can be made. Mars direct in Cancer in the 11th house. Think of Cancer in the 11th house as the family bonds, the community, the associations we have that on the one hand form a sense of, I resonate with you, you're my family. Community and family kind of become intertwined. But we are liberating from the structures of familiarity and the known. And we realize that who I am, my identity, isn't necessarily defined by my family of origin or these people that I've always associated with. So on the one hand, there can be a very strong black sheep consciousness, like you're an alien that just plopped down and you're like, who are these people? Where we inwardly feel different. And the key within that is to claim our own soul vibration, our own individuality. Our affinities and our groups and our sense of family will oftentimes come together on their own through us vibrating our unique essence, right? Otherwise, the other dimension would be one of suppression, where we're trying to fit in and belong and be a part of something that doesn't resonate with us. And so we're trying to fit into the group. We're trying to belong to the clan or to the family, but it's just not true for who we are. It's like, imagine a group of, you can always use 11th house metaphors for like 5th house, 11th house is like, 5th house, the individual kid, and 11th house, the group, like the cliques and the social networks that kids form. It's a very accessible because we've all kind of experienced that as children, but it it's an accessible way to think of it because we all understand what it's like as kids. So imagine a group of kids and there's a clique, right? And the clique, they all resonate with each other because they all like sports, or they all wear red dresses, or they all like the same TV show, things like that. And that sense of belonging says, oh, I'm a part of this. I'm included, right? Now, there's always going to be the truth that within that, there's a aspect of each individual kid's being that doesn't resonate with the others, right? Where actually I like these things, but they don't like those things. Or actually I have my own interests, but maybe they don't have those interests. I'm actually also really into math and chess, but they're not into math. That's kind of nerdy. And so we project these boxes around our tribes and our affinities and our belongings where we think, well, I belong if I'm like this, but if I'm like this, I don't belong. But the truth is, you simply are who you are. And we all already are what we are. And we're trying to fit ourselves into these boxes because we want to be connected. So the higher dimension, the teaching here is that we belong, and our sense of community and belonging is linked to our essential vibration. Being what we are and vibrating our own individuality naturally brings us into affinity with others that at that time will resonate with us. And community grows naturally on its own. So Mars here can be saying, essentially, if we're suppressed and are holding back because we want to belong, we might feel really repressed, suppressed, afraid. I don't want to be traumatized. I don't want to be an outsider. Or we might feel very angry. And all of that will be indicating to us where we need to be a leader of our own emotional security. That means be at home in your own, be a community in your own home. How do I say that? Let the community be an extension of being at home with yourself, right? Be alone in that if you need to. Because if we suppress our own vibration for the sake of belonging, we're not really going to be happy. There can be this weird paranoia thing that happens as well. Oh, others are out to get me, or they don't want me, or they think I'm weird, or because I posted that thing on Facebook, they're not going to talk to me. It's important to stay clear of that because there can be a heightened awareness of differentness, and this will be exaggerated even further with the whole Leo Aquarius dimension being added to that soon. That sense of differentness is, oh, I'm different, I'm not like them. But then the more tender part of it is, do I belong? Can they still be my friend? And the answer is yes, but this is your decision to keep your mind free of that divisiveness. Don't let yourself get sucked into the me versus them or us versus them or belong or don't belong. Keep friendly, stay kind, stay true to your path, but don't let differences become a point of you can't be a part of it anymore. And sadly, this is where we see a lot of people of their own members of the same family. They get so identified with the differentness that it's literally no different than the cool club where everyone in that team, they're all like a part of that team because like all the girls wear pretty dresses and they all like dresses, but then like one member of that team is also into like playing complex computer chess with computers, and then suddenly they're a nerd, and I'm like, well, am I supposed to be the nerd? And do I still get to like all these games that we play? Sorry for how long it took to throw that analogy out there. It's silly, right? We can all just accept each other and be who we are. So the Mars leadership is, don't suppress your individuality for belonging, but don't create war out of difference. Walk your path and be a leader in being who you are, and let the affinities and the formations of groups and connections kind of arrange themselves however it naturally wants to be. There are some neighbors that are just next to us and they're different, and that's okay. We can still, share the extension cord or the windblower when they need help, or we can ask for help when we need a windblower. And I have neighbors here that are just politically, socially, energetically completely different, but there's such a sense of love and affinity because there's care. And there's that ground, natural, intuitive knowing, which is we're all here together, and giving and including and sharing are natural. And I think this is really important if you have the signature, or if Mars is going to be moving into your 11th house soon, to really just hold an awareness. So maybe 1/12 of those who are watching this, right? To really hold an awareness where in your life, and we all know this is happening, a lot of look at that group, that's a bad group, where there might be a temptation to fall into that, and what it might be like to strengthen your commitment to a more inclusive principle of humanity, where we can be different, but we can still be kind to one another. I think that ability for kindness is often compromised. People that feel powerless and don't know their ability to be true to themselves and to express themselves and to be who they are will turn towards anger and violence because they don't know that they can actually be themselves. Like often underneath it all, it's just a deeper vulnerability. I'm going to be rejected. I'm not safe to be me. I've been rejected. I've been alienated. So I'm going to be harsh towards you because fundamentally, I don't really know yet that I'm safe. So this can be the leadership of determining and expressing our essential safety. And I'll say one more thing. I'm in the middle of writing this article that I'm very excited to write. That's focused on peace activists from Israel, from Gaza, from the West Bank, Palestinians and Israelis, that are all sharing in the same intent, which is to be friends. And what does that mean? Well, I'm going to listen to your story and your experience and be interested in your narrative. I'm going to be interested in what it's like to be a part of this group of people that has this history. And to actually be interested in that listening because, hey, you've lost loved ones, I've lost loved ones. And to not go into the my team versus your team, but in the we all need care. And for there to be peace, we have to learn how to get along with each other, even with our differences. And I'm really passionate about that because, of course, I'm a Jew and I've lived in Israel, and I see how much strong polarized beliefs and opinions are. And it's almost hard to say anything about one side, quote unquote, without it maybe seeming like you're on some team or another team. Or one side like, yeah, you said that, but I feel hurt because you're not including that. And I understand that. There's been a lot of pain. And I think what's needed is for us to feel that our experience and our stories matter. And so I'm bringing this up because this is the 11th house. Like the stories is actually a very 9th house, 3rd house thing. But the 11th house component is, and we can get together to form community. There are workshops, there are these online talks, there are people forming groups to just listen to each other so we can understand that we're all needing to branch out of this sort of really old tribal me versus you mentality, because that's not where the healing is going to come. So stay tuned to that. Maybe I'll post it in the description so that those who are interested can access this article. I don't know when this article will be out, but I'm working on it right now. Mars direct in Cancer in the 12th house. So as I've spoken before, Cancer in the 12th house, on the one hand, can feel like the orphan archetype, where that sense of home and safety and security in a commonly 12th house way is sort of like, where is it? The absence, the lacking of that nourishment. And so there can be that sense of, I'm hiding, I'm kind of feeling small, my deeper emotional needs don't really have a place in the world. And that can express on the level of, there's really a sort of coldness and meaninglessness, and home is this abstract, intangible concept. It can also be the other end of that, where home is this beautiful universal idea where everyone's a brother and sister, and we're connected to this universal source of love and nourishment and providing and deeply empathic. But even within that, there can be this issue of giving and sharing and being deeply caring and empathic, but on the inside, not really knowing where our home is, not really knowing how to be cared for. So there can be a lot of martyrdom, a lot of giving of ourselves, but on the inside, not necessarily knowing who we are and where we can truly rest ourselves. So there's a lot of beautiful healing that we want to unpack with Cancer in the 12th house, because this is a journey of trust. It says we are home, we are loved, and we are love. And that is our true identity. But the challenge is it's easy to spiritually bypass and to be like that tender, emotional, vulnerable part of ourselves that needs to be held or cared for. Well, you are loved, you're cared for, don't worry about that. We actually want to bring our divine love and these universal principles of truth into these tender and delicate parts of our being. And that can be hard because the tendency with Cancer in the 12th is to remain hidden, or at least to be distracted with external forms of service and giving as a way to avoid really facing one's deeper existential sense of lostness. And so Mars stationing direct can really be bringing a lot of attention to that. One, there can be a sense of depression, lostness, emptiness, meaninglessness. And Mars is like, yeah, all this energy of fear, of lostness, of feeling far away from home, of not, all of that's there, and you can't repress that. The spiritual bypassing quality of Cancer in the 12th is being stimulated, pushed by Mars. And it says you have emotions, you have feelings, And it's here, and it's very human, and it's very real. And so that can become the point of falling into a very hyper extreme place of despondency, feeling just very disconnected from life. But really underneath that, there's a lot of emotion. So the other dimension is, oh, there's emotion. There's anger. There's fear. There's hurt. There's aloneness. And what do we do with that? I think, and I want to speak this, I'm going to be as thoughtful as I can in expressing it. This energy, while we can say abstractly, well, it's all unreal, right? It's not true. That's not helpful because Cancer says we need to assimilate and process our emotional experience. Everything needs to be fully processed and assimilated. Otherwise, it's just a spiritual concept. So what do we do with this energy? It needs to be expressed. And it's like you're free to let all the fear, the anger, the hurt, the aloneness come forward, because if it's true that none of these things are actually real, then it must be absolutely safe to open them up. It's a paradox, right? If we hide them, we'll never allow ourselves to truly be held and to find out the truth. If we hide them under the premise of, well, it's not true, we'll actually be repressing it and we'll never really learn what's true. But if we actually allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and this vulnerability can be just in our prayer or in our relationships, like we're crying in the arms of our parents. And the higher expression of Cancer in the 12th is a very palpable, real internal experience of being held by the divine in a very practical way. And the divine will always bring us the experiences that are accessible and attainable for us in the ways that we're able to receive it. Right? Like a child will always receive from the loving parent what is helpful and nourishing to them. The parent won't be like, I see you, I'm with you, but really the child's needing to be held. It's actually being held, it's actually being taken care of. And so the ways in which we're needing to be loved and cared for, it's accessible for us, is exactly what we will receive if we really allow ourselves to be vulnerable in the face of all that we're feeling. The absence of the care and the attention and support that we need can easily be a direction not to give up faith, but to actually be vulnerable about our condition. It's the lack of vulnerability, it's the lack of surrender that keeps us from receiving the immensity of love that wants to be offered. So from the point of view of where Mars and Cancer in the 12th can be giving a lot, providing, serving, it really does want to highlight and give attention towards where might there be a sense of martyrdom or exhaustion or depletion. We need to be able to let some people suffer, right? Sometimes we can't give enough to save everyone in the world from all the pain, all the beings, and all the pain that they experience. If we are exhausting and depleting ourselves in our service, we have to really ask ourselves the question, what good are we really doing for others? So there's often this deeper lesson in recognizing there is pain and there is suffering and there is hurt in the world. But Mars points out this question, what's my role to play? Who am I, and how can I be an instrument and an agent of greater healing and purpose in this world? What's my role? And again, moving into that Leo energy, whether it's in your 12th or in your first, we're moving towards greater confidence and purpose in embodying a great amount of creative power and energy. So there's a growing sense of confidence and entitlement and courage to say, I am here to love and to be love, but I'm not going to depend upon my own thinking, because I can live my life trying to protect people from their own feelings and thus not really anchoring in a higher divine purpose. And I can also live my life ignoring my own feelings and thus never really know how safe and how loved I truly am. So this Mars stationing direct calls for courage in our faith and our devotion to know who we are and to live as a love that we are, more clearly, more lucidly, more confidently. And this completes my overview of Mars and Cancer direct through the 12 houses. If you're new to my channel, please be welcome to subscribe. Like it as well. This helps the algorithm, helps support my business. And please be welcome to share this with a friend or anyone that you think would benefit from the teachings that I'm sharing here. Thank you so much for watching.